As you first heard here on the 11th hour on Friday, intensive trade talks between the United States and Canada collapsed late last week. Both sides blame each other for the impasse. As a result, Donald Trump imposed 50% tariffs on $20 billion worth of Canadian goods, including plywood, beer, and dairy. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has responded by promising to retaliate dollar for dollar, adding that his country was attacked and is now, quote, at war with the United States. Trump is now threatening to go further, vowing new tariffs on cars, trucks, auto parts, and steel. As the Wall Street Journal's editorial board writes, quote, President Trump took exception last year when we called his tariffs against Canada and Mexico the dumbest trade war in history. It got dumber this weekend. In addition to a host of economic demands, Prime Minister Carney says American negotiators also tried to prevent Canada from forging trade deals with other nations and restrict protections for Canadian culture, notably Quebec's French language laws. And that was a red line for Carney, who said Canada is, quote, not prepared to compromise on our sovereignty, the protection of the French language, and our culture. The United States Trade Representative called that a fake story. The Toronto Star writes that Carney saw Trump's move as a, quote, attack on Canadian sovereignty, an attempted psychological annexation that could have turned Canada into an American client state, a sort of North American Belarus, end quote. This entire ordeal has infuriated Canadians across the political spectrum. Doug Ford, the Conservative Premier of Ontario, Canada's most populous province, says Trump is a dictator and a bully and a loser who can, quote, kiss my ass. Trump responded in kind, calling the Prime Minister Governor Carney, a reference to Canada being made the 51st state, and calling Doug Ford his flunky, adding, quote, someone should get these clowns to fall in line, end quote. When asked about this by a reporter this afternoon, Doug Ford again referred to his posterior.
Did the Prime Minister tell you to ask you to tone it down a bit?
No, he didn't. I'm not going to comment, but he wasn't against that. And I have a lot of real estate on my ass, so he has a lot of room to kiss my ass. So
Well done.
I just do. I'm a big dude. What can I say?
The consequences of Trump turning America into an unreliable trade partner are already evident. Canada has been expanding its economic ties with other countries, including a major new deal with China, in which Canada imports Chinese electric vehicles and China imports more Canadian agricultural goods. In addition, Canada has accelerated plans to export a significant amount more crude oil to China. Joining me now is Justin Wolfers, professor of public policy and economics at the University of Michigan and the host of Platypus Economics. Justin, something you know, but many Americans may not know, is that Mark Carney is a liberal and Doug Ford is a conservative. And I mean, obviously in Canada, the spectrum is a little narrower, but these guys are on opposite sides of the political spectrum. This trade war with Canada has united Canadians in not a great way regarding America.
Absolutely. I actually think there's something really quite important for those of us on this side of the border to understand, which is to the Canadians, this is not a trade war. Look, the trade wars, tariffs, friends can figure stuff like that out. The real turning point in this relationship came when Trump started joking about making Canada the 51st state, made it clear that he didn't care about their consent, and actually said that he would use the United States' economic power to force it into submission. Look, I don't know what was in the president's heart at the time. Presumably this is some sort of a joke, but it turns out that when you tell another country you want to take over, whether they like it or not, they just don't take it well. And that, I think, so for the Canadians, this is an existential threat.
Yes.
For the United States, this is a trade war.
Right.
And you need to, that fundamentally changes everything. And I just want to point one more thing out. This was so dumb. Your job as a politician is to make it easy for the other side to say yes.
Yeah.
The president's online trolling has made it impossible for the Canadians to say yes. He's hurt you and I and all of the viewers in order to be really good at social media.
Yeah. So tell me what the bigger problem is here, because this is $20 billion, so it's about 5% of trade with Canada, although it's $20 billion. That's real money. And by the way, if Canada retaliates, then they say dollar for dollar, so you double the impact that this has. But is it that? Because that's technically fixable. As you said, friends can work out trade issues. Or is it this long-lasting effect? Canada sells more than two-thirds of its goods to the United States, and it's just learning that it needs more trade partners. It needs to diversify its market.
Right. And so I think you're exactly right. And so this is where the background is really fundamentally important, which is the United States has a free trade agreement with Canada.
Yes.
It was initially put forward by President Clinton. It was called NAFTA. The first President Trump came to power and he just ripped it up. He said, I don't like it. Turns out he's not very good at doing his homework, so he taped it back together and then just gave it a new name, which was the USMCA. I always like to think it rhymes with YMCA, the song. It makes me think about the Village People. That makes me happy. But it was basically relabeled NAFTA. And then the second President Trump came to power and said, what idiot negotiated this agreement and ripped it up again?
Yeah.
Now, what you learn at this point is signing a deal with this bloke doesn't buy you anything.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then Carney and the Canadians would be fools to give anything up because the president has already shown that on a whim, he will choose not to deliver his end of the deal.
What's the Canada benefits from the fact that it's got this partner to the south that it can sell all its stuff to, but it's got a lot of stuff. It can sell it to other countries too. What happens to America? Because this abstraction that Trump carries on about these are costs that are paid for by the other country. When you put 50% tariffs on $20 billion worth of things that are imported, that's some big portion of that, if not 100%, is going to hit the consumer who's buying the end product.
Right. So right there, we can do the math. You're going to be paying a lot more for a relatively small number of your goods. You're going to live with that. Let me explain the deeper problem. I live in Michigan. Michigan's on the border. It's one of the great producers of automobiles in the world. And the way that works is we combine American expertise with Canadian expertise, which is there's one auto industry that's basically all around that border right there.
Yep.
The Americans have the assembly factories. The car door, though, might come from Canada. Now, if you're a Canadian auto parts manufacturer, locating right on that border and really throwing your lot in with General Motors and Ford and the future of Detroit made a lot of sense when Clinton negotiated NAFTA. But now the president he literally spent more of today declaring a trade war against Canada than against Iran.
Yep.
Despite the fact today was D-Day. But so now if you're a Canadian auto parts manufacturer, you no longer want to throw your lot in with Detroit because you no longer feel confident that that's going to be an ongoing, valuable, lasting relationship. You might build your next factory instead next to the port so that you can do business with Europe. That's the deeper and longer lasting thing. And that's going to hurt, yes, both the Canadian firm, but also it's going to mean that Detroit loses preeminence as an auto manufacturer. Yep. And this isn't just a story about cars, it's a story about cooperation.
Anything you talk about, it can be the same thing. The ports will relocate to the coasts where one side can go to Asia and one side can go to Europe. And eventually everybody will learn to live with it, but the effects are longer lasting than the tariff percentage on goods.